On this episode of One-on-One, you remember a while back we had a one-on-one with Coach Don Landry, but so many things have transpired since that interview. Only a few people deserve to come up and get that second one-on-one. He's one of them. He's done so much for the community, done so much for every part or aspect of what he's been involved in. Tonight, Coach Don Landry. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. One thing that I had to chuckle about, and until I read further, I realized, I saw you were the executive director of the National Cutting Horse Association, and I'm sitting there going, I never realized he was into horses, and as I read further, I found out you weren't into horses.
No, I was commissioner of the Southland and loving it and getting a good reputation and all that stuff. And one day I get a call from this search firm, and he was telling me that they'd been hired to fill an executive position. And out of curiosity, I said, well, what's the position? They said, executive director of the National Cutting Horse Association. I laughed because I thought somebody was playing a joke on me, because I didn't even know at that point what a cutting horse was, you know. And so he wanted to interview me in Fort Worth, and so I had never been approached, and I knew once he heard my story and that he realized this guy doesn't know what a cutting horse is. But I said, I had never been approached by a search firm. So I said, I need to go for it because maybe they'll have an athletic position one day that they've been hired to fill. So I wanted to have that contact. So anyway, I went to Fort Worth and had an interview, and when I came out, my wife had driven me, and she said, well, how'd it go? I said, that was fun, but now they know, that I don't know it, so that ends that. Well, I was shocked a few days later. He called me and said, you're one of the finalists. So I didn't want to turn it down then, so I went for the interview. I walk in, and there's all these Western guys with hats. They're the board of directors from all over the country. And so I walk in there, didn't know a single one. And I knew they weren't going to hire me, and I didn't want the job, frankly. And so I was very forceful, and I was independent, I guess. And so I would say something, and I'd say, no, that's not the way to do it. And, and apparently that impressed him. And so a few days later, and once again, after the interview, I said, well, now that's the end of it, because now they know, the board of directors knows I don't know anything. So I was surprised a few days later when the guy from the company, from the search firm called to tell me, well, they offered you the job. I couldn't believe it. I agreed to take it after turning it down. And so we left the Southland where I was real happy, and became the executive director. And I did grow as an administrator, saw wealth that that's an expensive hobby for the owners, and I learned a lot about cutting by then.
Like guys like Joe Montana and all that do cutting.
Well,
horses.
and we would have a celebrity cutting at our big horse show, cutting horse show. And not only Montana, but Michael Keaton, a whole bunch of celebrities that we got to know.
Did you buy a cowboy hat when you got the job?
They gave me the first one, and but when we were there shopping, I was buying a few jeans that I didn't have, and so I knew that they were comping the hat, and so when we checked out stuff I was buying, I said, well, out of curiosity, how much is this hat? At that time, it was $500, and so I'm glad
that's not your nature.
Well, and then I was able to get a few other thrift sponsors and different things. I was rich in cowboy hats.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, Call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
HTV, bringing you local news and sports for over 36 years. From tragic events to heartwarming stories from the community, sports from the regular season and into the playoffs. We were there each time COVID struck. And when Hurricane Ida devastated the area, HTV was there before and after the storm, bringing you live storm track updates and coverage of the aftermath. When other news outlets left, HTV was there, helping those in need. So for your news, stick with the ones you know, the ones that know you.
I've interviewed a guy named David Fournier a couple of times. You know David?
No.
He was a national champion in bull riding, and
Yeah.
he was inducted into Hall of Fame. And being a cowboy is pretty popular around here. It doesn't get enough recognition.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure you found that out, but the more and more that you promote it, a lot of people sort of cling to it a little bit.
Well, the ones that are in it are very passionate,
Yeah, they
you know. But Lucille, when we'd have one of the shows, it might last a week, and I'm in that Coliseum, and you know, all the smells are getting to me. So when I would get home at night, Lucille wouldn't let me in the house. I had to change and leave the clothes in the laundry room before I got to the rest of the house. So it was basically, I'm glad we did it. I learned a lot. I think I improved as an administrator. I had a 3-year contract, right. And I told him I'm not going to renew the contract. I knew I was out of place, and so I wanted to get back into college coaching, and I wanted to be a commissioner again. Yeah. Well, there's not that many commissioner positions, right. And so in the meantime, I had a friend who I met through cutting that worked. He was he was vice president of the Texas Rangers.
Right.
And so I ended up going to see him and saying, you know, can I volunteer, or you know, can I sit in on your promotions committee, your marketing committee? I want to learn, because I knew I wanted to get back into college coaching. And so he agreed to do that. And so I learned a lot through those meetings. So eventually, they ended up hiring me, right. A part-time job, and they developed a position because they knew I was going to leave. So they created a position. My title was Director of Special Projects. And President Bush was our owner then, but right. He wasn't even governor then yet, but George Bush. But his dad had been president. So he was our owner, and I was there for one whole year, and it was an interesting year because it was the last year in the Arlington Stadium. It was the year we moved into the then new stadium, and it was Nolan Ryan's last year. And so I really loved that experience of being there. But I knew I'm not a pro guy.
You had to organize his last hurrah, I guess. Huh?
Well, I was one of them on the committee, but I had certain things that I was responsible for. And the one thing on that night, for most players, you know, they'll have a day, like Nolan Ryan Day. Right. We had a week for Nolan Ryan. That's how big a hero he was.
Absolutely.
And so the one thing that I was involved in, and Lucille was there to help me, we were going to allow every player, every youngster named either Nolan or Ryan to walk the field before the game. And so we wanted to get their addresses, and so that's where she came in. She was going to get the addresses. We was going to send them a picture or something. Yeah. And but there were so many, it was time to walk, and we hadn't, so we quit doing it.
They had Nolans and Rons who were walking the field. They weren't Nolan or Ron.
Well, no, they did. They had to show proof, but it doesn't mean they were named after him. Yeah. But they had to prove they were either Nolan or Ron. And
you wrote a book on boxing.
You know, I was always a writer. I wrote a weekly column in the Bayou Catholic, and all before that, Southwest Register. So I've always enjoyed writing, but I've never written a book before. But what happened when we moved back to Baton Rouge after being out of state, I was a 5-sport letterman in high school, and boxing was the first one I lettered in. So when I came back, one of my friends said, you know, the boxers have a reunion every year. And this particular year, the reunion was in Lake Charles, and you ought to come. Well, I went, and I met some of these boxers that when I was younger that I looked up to. And so I really enjoyed that. But then I realized, they're all getting old. They're like World War II veterans. They're dying off.
Yeah.
And, the younger people in the state, they don't realize how big high school boxing and college boxing was in his day because it's been dropped since 58, I think. And so I started off, I said, I was determined, so I wrote an article, first of all. And then I expanded it to, and I had never written a book, so I had to learn myself. And we didn't have all these computer ways, so I had to learn by trial and error. So I wrote a book on the history of college and high school boxing. And so I can remember the first book signing in Lafayette that I went to. It was well attended by the boxers in that area. And so after I got up and I said a few words, and then I sat down at a table to sign autographs if anybody wanted them, and Lucille was collecting the funds. Well, I thought probably everybody there would buy, maybe one book or maybe two books. Well, they were coming up buying like 10 or 11 at a time. Wow. Because I'm thinking they wanted to buy one for all of their kids because they probably had told their kids about how big boxing was.
Right.
Or that how good they were. Yeah. Well, this was their proof.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
My daddy loved boxing, and I never got it because we didn't sort of grow up, but they'd sit on the porch and listen to the boxing matches on the radio. I mean, it was big.
Well, it was, and I remember also as a youngster, because my Landry family were some boxers, and so I remember listening to the Billy Conn, Joe Louis fight in the 40s when I was a little kid. Yeah. And so we did the same thing. We were, you didn't have TV in those days, so you'd listen to some of the big matches on radio. So I can understand.
I know you're very proud that your family has all done very well. I want to give you a little chance to talk about your family.
We have 4 sons. They've all done extremely well. They all picked the right career to go into. I'm amazed how that happened. Chris, who's here today, he chose military, and he was an award-winning lieutenant colonel. But the same thing happened with all of them have done that. And they not only have been successful in their careers, they're good people, and they've married the right woman, and so I'm proud of and the wives have careers too. And so they all have done well. And then we have 12 grandkids, and it's too early to say where they might end up. But so far, it looks like all of them are going to be successful, and they're all good kids, and they're all good people. And so I'm very proud of that. And the biggest honor that we have when any of them give us a card and say that we're role models for their marriages, then that means we know we've done something well, So I'm very proud of the whole family.
Well, Coach, I got to tell you, you've been a role model for a lot of people. As a young reporter, you could have shunned me and could have said no, and along the way, I think you've opened your door for a lot of people, and a lot of people have seen your character along the way, and I just want to congratulate you on a great career, a very diverse career.
Yeah.
And I want to congratulate your wife, too, because she did a good job of managing you along the way.
Well, she's a key to my success, as I said.
Yeah, you've done tremendous. Let's close by doing this. If I were able to get your sons and your wife and your former players and your former coaches, former teammates, get them all in a room and said, give me one word that would describe Don Landry as a husband, a father, a coach, a friend, a commissioner, an athletic director, what would you hope the one word they would all come up with would be?
Well, I don't know if I'd hope, but I would think the first thing they'd say how hard I was, whatever I did, I worked extremely hard. Yeah. Now, the other thing, and this is not your question, but I didn't take my work home after hours. You know, at home I was just a dad or a husband. Some people, they can't separate them. Right. The other thing, too, is, as I said, we've talked about it, I've always been extremely organized in whatever I did. I was always a Christian. My wife and I are Christians, and I'm proud of that. I want to say we're good people. So any of these things, I'd be proud to have them describe.
And I hear in that whole scenario, disciplined.
Yes.
Just discipline. Discipline about every role in your life.
Yep.
Coach, I've enjoyed the talk with you. I've always admired you, and I'm glad I ran into you at Nichols, and I started telling Stephen that, hey, it's time for, we got to do another one-on-one. He's done too many things since the last one.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming by, and I enjoy speaking with you.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's been an honor after all these years that you even still remember me. So.
Oh, I'll never forget you, Coach. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good to see you again. Okay.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.